I tried to warn you, I tried to tell you he's a jerk. I stuck my neck out, though I knew it wouldn't work. Well, you were pissed and you were hurt. I probably should have known. Now you're pissed and hurt and heartbroken and alone. They say that love is blind, love is deaf as well. Love will make you stupid, stubborn as all hell.
It's so great to be doing this interview today because I don't know if Wendy told you, but last night I was in the emergency room with all sorts of problems, and they told me that I had a cold. So
Uh-oh.
after all these years, I'm saying, my God, come on. Anyway, here we are, and I wasn't going to cancel this opportunity simply because I know you're off on the road. And let me just briefly introduce you to the Catskills Air audience. John McCutcheon, the Washington Post called John the folk music's Renaissance man. And John is a multi-instrumentalist, a traditional music archivist, one of the primary revivalists of the hammer dulcimer, which I'm hoping you'll show us during this interview, a pioneering children's and family artist, and the very definition of the touring road warrior. And then came COVID. Since that time, unbelievably, John put out 3 albums during the pandemic, a total of, 50 some odd songs from those 3 albums?
There were 18 songs per album. So most musicians can't count past 1, 2, 3, 4. So
Tell me about it.
I'll let you all do the math.
Yeah, absolutely. And John's latest album is titled Leap. You saw a preview of it at the opening of this interview, and you'll see the back cover at the end of the interview with the songs on it. It's an 18 song album, and a little bit of background about you. You grew up in Warsaw, Wisconsin.
I did.
And September 2nd of this year, you released this album, Leap, your 3rd album of songs written during the pandemic. And you are quoted as saying, songs not about the pandemic, but because of the pandemic. Tell me about that.
Well, the first of the 3 albums I did were all songs I wrote in quarantine. I had been on tour in Australia when all this started and arrived back in the United States on March 16th of 2020. And because I had been overseas and been on a plane for 24 hours, I thought the only responsible thing to do would be go into quarantine. So my wife, who is also a writer, and I have a little cabin in the North Georgia mountains. And my dog and I went up there for 3 weeks, and I wrote and wrote and wrote because I was relieved of all the normal things of being an at-home guy. I didn't have to go to the airport every weekend like I was up to that point. I didn't have to, mow the yard or put in the garden or any of those things in that 3 weeks. And so a lot of the songs on Cabin Fever, which was the name of that album, were really inspired by the pandemic. I mean, the first song that I wrote for that recording was a silly little song called about imagining falling in love during that time, and you'd have to be 6 feet away from one another. I wrote a song about the whole notion of being sheltered in place. I wrote something in honor of all the frontline workers. And the last song I wrote was about the death of my friend John Prine.
Oh, yeah.
So those songs were really about the pandemic, and it was a it was one of those moments when the whole world, and especially, or at least this whole country, kind of stopped. And no matter what you normally would have been arguing about, or one group is, you know, experiencing this and nobody else is, everybody was experiencing kind of the same thing. And I thought, well, this is one of those rare moments. It's important to catch the lightning in a bottle. And that's what Cabin Fever was about. The subsequent albums, Bucket List and now Leap, are more just things that, given the amount of time I've had, I can explore lots of different things. Some reaching back many decades, and some that happened the very day I wrote them. So
Mm.
um, it gave me time to focus on what up to that point had been one of my many jobs. Well, you know, one of my jobs is to play a bunch of instruments well, so I have to keep up that practice. Another one is doing shows. Another one is being a dad, a grandfather, and being a songwriter, going into the recording studio. So this, all of that was taken away from me except being a songwriter. So
Uh,
that's what gave it was a tremendous gift, really.
Absolutely. And so this album is the third album written during the pandemic. And as you say, the songs not specifically about the pandemic. What startles me when I look at the information about you is that this is your 43rd album in your,
That startles me too.
what's that?
It startles me too.
43 albums in a 50-year career. That's it's wild. What more can I say? You're just an amazing person, and one of the legends in folk music these days, I must say. Along with people like Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger. You and I know Cy Khan. Many people don't know Cy. Tom Chapin, a whole bunch of great artists that just keep on going, and goodness gracious, you never stop. So, how do you feel about this urge to keep writing?
Well, I'm grateful that I'm involved in a craft that I can do my entire life. You know, one of the other people who's kept going all these years, of course, is Tom Paxton. And the next album that I'm doing, which I'm going in the studio in February to do, will be with Tom. He and I have been
Oh,
friends for many years, and we've been writing every Monday afternoon, uh, all during the pandemic. And we've got probably 100 songs we've written together. And we have to start winnowing through them to see which are going to make the cut onto this album. But you know, Tom and I were talking the other day because we're both sports fans, and I guess we were talking about football or something. And I
mhm.
said at one point, "Isn't it great that we turned out to be songwriters and not football players?" Because at our age, we would have been retired for 40 years. Um, and we couldn't do the thing we loved for the last half of our life. So you know, I'm grateful
Yeah.
that I stumbled into this world and this craft, and every day I get up, can't wait to do my job.
Will Tom Paxton be joining you on this next album when it
Oh
comes
yeah,
out?
yeah.
Oh, that's
It will
great.
be a John and Tom expedition. And we're both really looking forward. We just wrote yesterday. We're doing this recording on a Tuesday. I'm not sure when it will air, but uh, yeah. In fact, we just said we gotta put the brakes on because we're just getting
Too
too
much.
much stuff. It's cluttering up the field of having to make a decision. So there may
Yeah.
be several albums that come out of this, but the first one will be recorded in February.
Can't wait. Can't wait for that one. Maybe I can get Tom on here one of these days on Catskills Air. So you have, hopefully, you have a couple of songs planned to play for us during this.
Yeah. Uh, I just happen to have the guitar tuned up to this particular and capoed up to this particular tuning, and I'll do a couple songs from Leap. Um, and this is one that harkened back to the days immediately before the pandemic. In 2019, I was playing at a festival in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And one of the things that they wanted me to do was do several days of songwriting workshops with young writers from Northern Ireland. I've been doing a lot of songwriting camps here
Mhm.
in the United States for many years now. And even though some of the writers that were involved in this workshop were not even born when the Good Friday Agreement was reached in 1989, which attempted to bring an end to the trouble, what was called the Troubles. Um, that kind of thinking and the tail end of all that and what it meant continued to be a part of people's writing. And so, sitting on my front porch up in the Georgia mountains, I came up with this called The Troubles. In the times of the troubles, tired and aggrieved, neighbors kill neighbors for what they believed. They knelt in their churches, prayed to the same God, never once doubting that ever they tried. The confusion and enmity on full display, revenge, retribution, rule of the day. To the history of hatred, we all are made slaves to kill in revenge. Best dig two graves. We think of the troubles, the far and the few, Protestant, Catholic, Palestinian, Jew, Hutu and Tutsi, Sunni, Shiite, Republican, Democrat, the left and the right. The troubles begin with the thinnest of wedge, and before you imagine you're out on the ledge, one path or the other, they ask you to choose, casting your lot with a bet you all lose. You think of the troubles, the far and the few, Protestant, Catholic, Palestinian, Jew, Hutu and Tutsi, Sunni, Shiite, Republican, Democrat, the left and the right. Achilles and Priam sat down at the table and shared a sad feast as well as was able. Priam knelt down, knowing what must be done, kissed the hand of the man who murdered his son. In the times of the troubles, tired and aggrieved, neighbors kill neighbors for what they believe.
Wow. Let me get this view in here. Okay. Wow, that was so great. Um, everything on this album is great. And, one of the things that most people will find unusual is your website address is folkmusic.com.
It
And
is.
who has that? It's like you own
Well,
folk music.
I got it because nobody had it.
That is so amazing.
Shows you what a big blip folk music is out there in cyberspace, huh?
That is incredible.
Oh,
Uh,
I'll
a-
sell that domain one day for dozens of dollars.
huh. I think so. um, on that website, there are a number of tabs that people certainly might be interested in. And of course, your upcoming shows, none of them are in this area. Most of them are in California. But if people check the website and your upcoming performances, I'm sure in the future they'll find where you'll be performing in our area, New York, New Jersey, what have you. Um, your store, lots and lots of great things there. But the thing that interests me most of all is the camp. And tell me about this camp.
I have been invited by friends who have their own songwriting gathering affair. Some are called camps, some are called workshops, um, some are called retreats. And I was often brought in because I tend to write pretty quickly and I have a methodology that I can impart to people um, that talks about, well, here's if you're in a situation, you're, you know, somebody in you arrive at work one day and you hear that there's going to be a party and one of your coworkers who you know pretty well or everybody knows is going to be retiring and you think, wouldn't it be fun to tell funny stories about this person in a song, or you're at a political event and you're scheduled to play and a speaker says something really um, important, provocative, and you have the ability to grab that and put it into a song and create it in 15 or 20 minutes. So not a lot of people are able to write very quickly. So I was often brought in to sort of do this kind of kamikaze approach to songwriting. But what I found is all these camps seem to be talking a lot about the how of songwriting and not very much about the why of songwriting, which has always been really important to me. So, about 8 or 10 years ago, I decided to have my own um, songwriting camp. I put it at the Highlander Center in East Tennessee, which some of your viewers may know was the site of a lot of the social change movements, cultural tools. It's where Rosa Parks got her training before she sat down on the Montgomery bus on December 1st, 1955. It was not a spontaneous act. It was a strategic act. She got her training at Highlander. It's where um, We Shall Overcome gestated. It's the first place Martin Luther King ever heard that song. It's where Woody Guthrie took the young 20-year-old Pete Seeger, their first stop on their transcontinental hitchhiking and freight hopping adventure. So it was a place that I have had have a relationship with for over 50 years, and I thought it was a perfect place. Um, the simply the space itself would talk a lot about the why. So it's a camp I've been doing. I do two of them every summer. It's strictly limited to 20 people. It's sold out for this coming year. Um, but it's a wonderful thing. If I could, I'm just completely exhausted at the end of it. But at the same time, it does my heart great good because I feel like um, I'm planting some seeds in some nascent songwriters that will get out there and they'll be, I'm multiplying a little Johnny Appleseed business, I guess,
Great.
sowing some new songwriters out in the world. And the more songwriters there are in this world, mostly it's a better place.
Absolutely, absolutely. Have any of the people who attended this camp or workshops, what have you, gone on to uh, be popular among in the folk music
Well,
community?
everybody is popular to somebody. is what I
Yeah,
always tell friends who say, "Are you or my grandson said the other day, "Poppy, are you famous?" And I said, "Everybody's famous to somebody." Um, yes, there are, especially some younger people who have come, and there are people who come ranging from I've always thought about writing songs, but I've never done it, to people who are established artists who just want to jumpstart their writing in a new direction. So yeah, yeah, there have been people, and there are people who I can tell you you're gonna hear from. In
Great.
fact, I'm doing a master songwriting camp with a very, very limited number of people this July, and
Okay.
those
It
that
is
was an invitation only.
okay.
Uh, let's get
So it's
right
not
down.
open to the general public.
That one is not.
Okay.
But yes, the normal songwriting camps, the one that happen in May and June, they're definitely open to the general public. It's all you can do is get on a wait list now, but trust me, some of the wait list always clears.
Folkmusic.com is
Mhm.
where you can find out more information about this. Just click the tab that says camp. There's also a couple of tabs there as I look uh, behind you. There's like just about every instrument in the world. And you are, as I said in the opening, a multi-instrumentalist. And what is your favorite instrument? I know, probably guitar stands out, but are there others?
Well, the guitar is just a very versatile, portable instrument. There are instruments even on the wall you can see behind me that I don't travel with. Part of it is how much Delta Airlines will allow me to check. And the other is early on in my career, I would travel around with a dozen different instruments, and it just felt more like a circus than a concert. It was all, look at me, what I can do. And um, these days, it's all about the music. And I still travel with a half dozen instruments, but there are sometimes I won't pick up one of them
Mm,
or two of them in the course of an evening because the song choices did not move in that direction.
okay.
So I don't really have a favorite. I mean, I recently picked up um, a Hardanger fiddle, which is a Norwegian fiddle with the normal four strings and then 4 to 5 sympathetic strings. And it's just got a really different sound. And where I grew up in northern Wisconsin, some of the old Norwegian farmers would be playing the Hardanger. And I just thought, well, I'm a fiddle player. It'd be
Mm,
fun to have that. Um, it's often the newest instrument I have is my favorite because that's what I want to play all the time. Uh, let's see. I can show you. I can play you a little bit on if this thing is in tune. This was my favorite instrument. Oh, during the pandemic. It's an old. In fact, comes from New York. Um, Not originally. This was built by a fellow named Jim Hartke in Franklin, New York.
Oh, that's not far from here.
Yep. And it is a copy of a mid 19th century minstrel banjo. And it's got nylon strings and a skin head and no frets. Gonna build me, Lord. Something's not right. Gonna, my Lord, he said unto me, could you really like my garden so green? You may live in my garden if you keep the grasses green. I'll return in the cool of the day. Now is the cool of the day. Now is the cool of the day. This earth is a garden, garden of my Lord. And he walks in his garden in the cool of the day. Sorry. On a very old banjo, one of my favorite Gene Ritchie songs, Cool of the Day.
Let me ask two more questions.
Yeah.
One is a question and one is a request, if you have time. The question is, you've sung with so many artists. I ask this of all of the bigger artists that I interview. Is there anybody you haven't performed with that you wish you could?
Well, it would have been fun to play with Woody Guthrie.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he was my guitar instructor, unbeknownst to him. When I got my first guitar at 14, I went down to our local public library, and the only book under the Dewey Decimal System that had the subject guitar was a tattered black and white paperback book entitled Woody Guthrie Folk Songs. And it had a page of the chord grids that you people out there who play an instrument know what I'm talking about, and 60 songs. So I thought he was a guitar instructor.
Mm.
And so the first 20 or 30 songs I learned as a guitarist were Woody Guthrie songs. So, oh golly, I don't know.
That's okay. You don't have
Well,
to.
well, actually, over the last 25 or 30 years, I've played a lot with symphonies, actually.
Huh.
And I would love to play with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, my local
Really?
symphony.
Wow, that's a neat.
And it'll
that's a
happen.
neat-
It'll happen at some point.
I'm sure.
But it's so much fun to take this music, which is the oldest music in the world. Folk, all the world's music came from folk music. No matter what the culture, no matter what the genre, it all started off with folk music. And to have that in the ultimate long hair venue of playing with the symphony, some of the most fun and fulfilling stuff I've ever done has been playing with symphonies.
Fantastic. Over this past weekend, a couple of us who are folk music DJs at the local radio station WIOX, we were kind of vying to who was going to play Christmas in the Trenches. and I gave up my right to play it to a new guy who's never played it before, but I'm wondering if you'd be able to play that and tell the story behind it before we leave.
Sure. Let me rack this banjo over here.
Okay.
Well, perhaps the story, I've told a number of different stories about this song over the years, from how it got written to things that have happened to me because it got written. So maybe I'll tell a story that happened in 1988 in Denmark. I was playing at a festival in this little town right on the German border, a town called Turnder. And it's a little town that its population swells this one weekend in August every year. And audience comes from all over Europe, and musicians are coming in from literally all over the world. And on this particular year, I was honored to be one of the small handful of musicians from the United States that were there. Now, it being a small town, they had converted a bunch of their civic buildings into venues so people could go in and hear musicians in rooms and buildings large and small, everything from a small mill to a school auditorium to a church sanctuary to a big marquee that they'd put up in the town square. And one of the things that was same about each of these venues, which were all very different in and of themselves, was that about 5 minutes after I would start, in from the back door or the tent flap would come these 4 old men. Now, I was the only person in the entire place that was facing the door or the tent flap. And the lights were usually not on, but I could tell by their silhouettes that they were old men. They were bent over, moving slowly. And they came in late, and there usually wasn't a place for them to sit, so they would make their way up to the front, where most of the teenagers were standing. And when I would finish, they would catch my eye and nod and turn to leave, only to show up once again 5 minutes late the next time I was doing a performance. Well, it's my last show, and I'm going directly from the stage to the airport to catch a flight home. And these guys, once again, catch my eye and nod and turn to leave, and I think, I'm never going to see these guys, and I need to find out why they are showing up at every single one of my shows. So I leapt off the front of the stage, much to the delight of the teenagers, I might add, and I ran up the middle aisle as people were filing out, and I grabbed the last of these 4 men, and I just said, "Who are you, and why are you here?" And luckily, he spoke English. And he said, "Well, we've come to this festival especially to see you." And I said, "I kind of gathered that, but why?" And by this time, his friends had gathered round, and the 4 of them pieced together their tale for me. Oh, we were all growing up together in the same little village, about 100 kilometers outside of Berlin. And we went to the same schools, we lived next door to one another, we played on the same soccer teams. And when we were just 14 or 15, we all went down together, lied about our age, and signed up to join the Kaiser's army. And we were just kids, we were so scared. And luckily, we somehow all made it home. Had a normal life, got married, had kids, jobs, and little by little the kids moved off. Our wives passed away. We retired from our jobs until we were just 4 old men living hundreds of kilometers apart. And one Christmas, we all said, let's just all move in together. So we now have 4 adjoining rooms at the big veterans home in Berlin. And it's a nice place, but we don't get to see very many young people. It's another reason we came to this festival. It's fun to be around young people again. The only young people we see are the orderlies, and they're good to us. They're nice enough, but you can tell that they think we're crazy because we try to tell them our stories. I mean, how are young people going to learn anything if the old people don't talk to them? But they just think we're crazy. Well, one day we heard one of our stories, maybe our most important story, coming out of the radio. And it was you. And we didn't know who you are, and no offense, we didn't care. All we knew is that we had to get the orderlies to come and listen so that maybe if they heard our story being told by a young voice, they would believe it, because we were there. We were there. And these 4 old men, when they were 4 scared young teenagers, for one night, were maybe the sanest people on the planet. And name is Francis Tolliver. I come from Liverpool. 2 years ago, the war was waiting for me after school. To Belgium and to Flanders, to Germany to here, I fought for king and country I loved dear. It was Christmas in the trenches, where the frost so bitter hung. The frozen fields of France were still, no Christmas songs were sung. Our families back in England were toasting us that day, the brave and glorious lads so far away. Well, I was lying with my messmates on the cold and rocky ground, when across the lines of battle came a most peculiar sound. Says I, now listen up, my boys, each soldier strained to hear, as one young German voice sang out so clear. He's singing bloody well, you know, my partner says to me. Soon one by one each German voice joined in harmony. The cannons rested silent, the gas clouds rolled no more, as Christmas brought us respite from the war. Well, as soon as they were finished and a reverent pause was spent, God rest you merry gentlemen, struck up some lads from Kent. The next they sang was Stille Nacht, to Silent Night says I, and in two tongues one song filled up that sky. There's someone coming towards us, the frontline sentry cried. All sights were fixed on one lone figure, trudging from their side. His truce flag like a Christmas star shone on that plain so bright, as he bravely strode unarmed into the night. Soon one by one on either side walked into no man's land, with neither gun nor bayonet we met there hand to hand. We shared some secret brandy and we wished each other well, and in a flare-lit soccer game we gave 'em hell. We traded chocolates, cigarettes, and photographs from home. These sons and fathers far away from families of their own. Young Sanders played his squeeze box, they had a violin, this curious and unlikely band of men. Soon daylight stole upon us, France was France once more. With sad farewells we each began to settle back to war. But the question haunted every heart that beat that wondrous night: whose family have I fixed within my sights? It was Christmas in the trenches, where the frost so bitter hung. The frozen fields of France were warmed, as songs of peace were sung. The walls they'd kept between us to exact the work of war had been crumbled, gone forevermore. Oh, my name is Francis Tolliver, in Liverpool I dwell. Each Christmas come since World War I, I've learned its lessons well. But the ones who call the shots won't be among the dead and lame, and on each end of the rifle we're the same.
John McCutcheon with Christmas in the Trenches. Um, his new album is Leap. And as I said, it'll be the header on the opening of this interview, and you'll be able to see the back. I'll play some brief little clips from the album. John's website, folkmusic.com, amazingly enough. And all I want to say is, John, thank you so much for joining me today and giving us a little bit of your time. I know you have such a busy schedule.
Well, I appreciate it, Artie. It's always nice to chat with you, and I will see you soon. I hope.
I hope so. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Artie. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
A whole world died this morning when she passed away.